Welcome to the Eat for Endurance Nutrition podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a registered dietitian and running coach in New York City. And I'm really excited for today's topic. We're going to discuss intuitive eating and sports nutrition with my guest, Heather Caplan. She's a dietitian, running coach, and toddler mom like myself. She's based out of the DC area, and she has her own podcast called RD Real Talk, which you should all check out. It's great. And I think you're really going to enjoy our discussion as we dive into all the different philosophies of intuitive eating, how it relates to athletes and other clients of ours, and how we handle certain, questions and challenges as dietitians with our clients. So definitely check it out. Let me know what you think. Before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer that all information provided is for educational purposes only and is in no way meant to replace individual medical and nutrition recommendations. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Heather Caplan. Hi, Heather. Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me.
So we met back in 2015 at the SCAN Symposium, which, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's Sports Cardiovascular Wellness Nutrition. And that was out in Portland, Oregon. I think we were on a morning run together, if I remember correctly, which was loads of fun. We were just running and it was a beautiful day. And we were chatting about kind of our whole, backgrounds and how we got into nutrition and what we were up to. And after that, because that was just a morning and we connected on social media. And I have not seen you in person since then, but I've since followed your career very closely, just because you're always up to so many interesting things. And including, of course, you have your own podcast, the RD Real Talk podcast, which I will definitely link to in the show notes. Everyone should check it out. It's great. I think you and there's so many other dietitians who, back then I really wasn't very familiar with the whole intuitive eating and weight inclusivity and health at every size movement and philosophies. And those definitely become so much more prominent, I think, in the whole dietitian world. And you see more of it on social media, which is so awesome. And as I was telling you earlier, I don't necessarily categorize myself as, a full-on intuitive eating dietitian in the sense that I'm not certified. And, I do still accept clients who want to work on some form of body manipulation or weight loss of some kind, so it's not like I say I won't work on that, but more and more, especially in the last year, and particularly I'd say in the last 6 months, I've just been really drawn into, more and more towards all of these different philosophies that make up in the intuitive eating philosophy. So when I was thinking, who do I want to have as one of my first guests on the podcast, you immediately popped into my mind because I just recently listened to your series that you did. I think it was maybe a couple years back on, going into detail on every single one of the intuitive eating principles. And, I was actually listening to those, I'm for listeners that we're recording at the time, I'm almost 28 weeks pregnant. So this is, I was going nice and slow, running around Central Park, listening to all your episodes on intuitive eating and really drawn into it and thinking this is just really clicking with me and jiving with me. And I want to bring this more into my own practice with the clients that I work with. So I'd love to hear more about what you do. And of course, we'll cover all kinds of different angles of this, but particularly because you do a lot of work with athletes and of course, people who are recovering from eating disorders. So, we'll get all into that good, stuff. But I guess so before we talk about intuitive eating in more detail, why don't you share a little bit about your own journey as an athlete? Because you're, of course, a running coach as well, like me, and dietitian, and how you came to embrace the intuitive eating and health at every size philosophies.
Sure. So when we met, I did not have this language either. I was not totally into these things because I didn't know about them. I had never heard of them. So we were in the same space. And so myself as an athlete, I definitely identify as a runner, and I have for a long time. I grew up playing soccer, and I think a lot of soccer players end up as runners, or at least distance runners, and have done 8 or 9 marathons. I never thought I'd be the person that lost count of that, but I don't know. I've done some marathons.
Yeah, totally. I hear you.
Done like countless half marathons. I love to just kind of hop into 10Ks and halves for fun these days. And learned a lot about myself and about nutrition as like being my own athlete. I think obviously we have the textbook education and we have our careers and our career experiences, but then we can also use that knowledge to learn more about ourselves. So that's how I got interested in sports nutrition. And I've never been interested in participating in sports nutrition at a like high elite level with athletes, but more of the day to day. We would maybe call them recreational athletes. That's, someone like myself who just does this stuff for fun, but also for health and sanity and all the reasons that we do it. So I got interested in it for those reasons and have always kind of learned about it on the side, depending on what my jobs were. They probably weren't related to sports nutrition, but now my job gets to be somewhat related to sports nutrition. So when I came across intuitive eating, it just made a lot of sense to me. It was definitely something I needed at the time. I was kind of ready to take a break from dietetics altogether, to be honest.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, this is what I needed. This is what really jives with me. The book itself is co-authored by 2 dietitians, and the philosophies just really made sense to me and aligned with what I was hoping to do as a dietitian. So it kind of gave me a language for the things that I was looking for. And to me, it was a no-brainer to combine intuitive eating with sports nutrition. And it seems a little weird to do that, I think, for people who have sort of an initial or maybe even like surface level understanding of intuitive eating. It seems like the two would be at odds, but I find that they're not. So I've, learned that through my own experiences and luckily have been able to translate that into my work with clients.
Yeah, I mean, sports nutrition, so that's largely what I do. Of course, I work with like a whole variety of clients. I'm clinically trained and all that, but sports nutrition is one of my focus. And of course, it involves so many numbers and guidelines and all this research. And of course, intuitive eating, I know there's a lot of research surrounding that too, but it's reconciling all of that with, listening to your body and more of obviously I know intuitive eating is so much more about that than just like listening to your body, but I'd say that's one of the guiding principles of it. But, feeling your fullness and being satisfied and all these things can of course play into, how we fuel ourselves as athletes. But there are, of course, times where you just got to eat breakfast before you run that marathon. And maybe you're eating breakfast at like 3:30 in the morning and you're not hungry and you just got to do it, So at least my guess and, about like surrounding all of that is there are times where you have to kind of almost override certain of the intuitive eating principles, or maybe like, you've done a long run and your appetite's suppressed because that happens naturally or after a race, but that you will feel better in the, later in the day if you get your recovery nutrition in within the 30 minutes or hour, even if you don't feel so great. So maybe it's just finding, maybe you're drinking your calories instead of eating them or something like that. I mean, I don't know, maybe give me your take kind of on all of that. Maybe that's just my guess at it.
Totally. So I think one thing that people tend to do, especially being new to this idea and this concept and these philosophies of intuitive eating or a non-diet approach, is they tend to initially put it in the same context as a diet or as like our nutrition education is kind of like, here are the rules for healthy living, right? So I think initially the tendency, and I have certainly been in this place before, so I understand it completely. The tendency is to put those 10 principles into that same box of like, these are the 10 rules of intuitive eating. These are the 10 ways that you eat intuitively, when really, and this is really hard to understand without like putting it into practice for a long time, but really what is intended with the philosophy and the principles is to create a foundation of body autonomy, attunement, and self-awareness. Yeah. So, and all of those things relate to athletes, right? Like with body autonomy, you have to know what kind of training plan is going to work for you. You have to know how many miles a week works for you, like what fits into your lifestyle, what are your training goals, what are some of the things that have led to an injury in the past just for you. Like you have to really get to know your body so well. So body autonomy, attunement, like tuning into how your body's feeling, like you were saying, is this a great day to do a speed workout? Like maybe not. It's 90 degrees and 80% humidity outside. Like,
absolutely.
Or like my legs are feeling a little tired or sore or achy or whatever. So like learning all those body cues and then having that awareness of what do I need to do to take care of myself? So I would say in any context that we use intuitive eating, like there's going to be something that just slightly seems to override one of the principles or seems to take place of one of the principles, but really they all work together and we just use it as a foundation, but that doesn't mean we have to follow them all to a T.
Sure.
So like another example would be someone who has a chronic health disease that requires like either like maybe you have celiac, so you're removing gluten-free. Well, like, can I eat intuitively if I'm gluten-free? Like, yeah, that's just a medical need for you that you don't have gluten in your diet,
Yeah, yeah,
so
absolutely.
we can work with that. So yeah, with athletes, I mean, it's a lot of the things that you described. Like I would definitely say, okay, if you don't feel hungry after a workout, most of us experience that. We understand it, especially really hard workouts or really long workouts, which are usually both. Have a smoothie or have a recovery
Yeah,
drink and then wait
exactly.
45 minutes to an hour, and you should get that hunger cue, or that should sort of whet your appetite and get your system going. But we have to first and foremost know what your body needs as an athlete at any level, whether that's recreational, semi-elite or elite or professional or whatever, collegiate, you name it. We have to know, like, what are your body's needs and how can we meet those, but how can we also remove a lot of the tendency to obsess or fixate or overanalyze a lot of what we're doing. And I do see that a lot at the recreational level. And maybe you can
Yes.
speak to this as well.
Yes.
People who are like, well, here's my training plan, but I also need to make sure I eat this exact number of calories every day. And I only eat this many grams of whatever. And I don't eat after this time. And I only drink Nooner water and like never do anything else. Like it just becomes, I think there's a certain type of personality that's drawn to being an athlete at this level. Like it's not totally normal to train for a marathon, right? Like it requires like kind of a certain drive, a certain type of personality that's drawn to that. And that's not good or bad. It's just a thing. And I think that same characteristic or personality type is drawn to the obsessive, over-analyzing, fixating on all of the rules and sticking to the plan so that we can feel like we're in control of an outcome, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I see people who, I don't just work with runners, but, I do work with a lot of runners. I've done ultras myself and a lot of trail running kind of before my first baby. And I haven't done too much longer stuff, but yeah, it definitely takes a different type of person to like want to run more than a marathon,
right. Or
and,
even like
or an Ironman.
Yeah. Ironman.
So I work with a lot of triathletes. I work with a lot of, people doing Ironman. And actually a really interesting subset of clientele that I've started working more often with is like teenage athletes, but highly competitive teenage athletes and some collegiate runners. And that's kind of most of my clientele, most of them are adults ranging, all across the board. I have up to, 70 years old, but a lot of, it's really fascinating working with people who are in those like formative years, like before like the eating disordered or disordered eating tendencies, like they're more susceptible to that. It's like before it's hit. I think the youngest I've worked with is 11. But that's actually, wow. Yeah, I mean, more so like 15, 16, 17, that kind of age. But it's actually really, really interesting. And I mean, that's just a total side note. But it's really, and being able to kind of trying to influence them more towards the intuitive eating approach. And what's funny is before, and maybe we can backtrack after I say this just to kind of introduce what are these intuitive eating principles we keep alluding to. But before I really knew more fully what intuitive eating was all about, before I read the book and, I listened to your podcast and really like delved more into it, I was kind of not really knowingly working in almost all of those principles into what I was doing. Granted, I think I and sometimes still do rely a little bit more on the numbers, grams of carbs. And one of the practices I freelance at, we do have the resting metabolic rate test. And I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that too. But that's the only time that I will ever give caloric ranges is when it's been tested. And I always say, whenever I give any sort of number or, we're talking about, being more attuned with night eating and that kind of stuff. I always say, if you're hungry, I want you to eat. And that's always what I've said, listen to your body always comes first. So I always try to say that, but it's very interesting kind of, reading the book after the fact and being like, oh yeah, actually I've been doing a lot of these things already, just not really, not fully. Like, again, I still work with weight loss clients. I still have all of these, and we'll address the whole weight thing later, but, so I still take on these types of clients, but as it's become harder and harder to work on, weight concurrently with performance, it's like I began to question all of this more and more. And I'm like, wow, I do think there is something to this whole intuitive eating thing. But anyways, let's backtrack for a second. Can you kind of go into a little bit more detail about the principles of intuitive eating for our listeners who are not familiar with the whole thing being more than, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full?
Sure. So this is like a real test to see if I could remember all of them. I
I
don't
can
know if I
remember
can
some
off the
too, I
top of my
think.
head. Or at least I may not say them in order.
Oh, you don't have
but
the same in
yeah,
order. Don't worry
so
about that.
there, as we've said, there is a book. It's co-authored by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And so I think, again, the tendency sometimes is to say, okay, well, I want to do intuitive eating. Like I hear this from clients who will reach out and say, like, I've heard of it, I've read the book, I want to do it. I'm like, well, it's just a thing you incorporate,
Mm-hmm,
you know,
mm-hmm.
like it's sort of
Yeah, they're
like
like,
a
I got the
philosophy of
workbook.
being. Right. Like, how do I go through it and do it all correctly? And again, our tendency is to like put it in the same box that we might put a diet or certain food rules, because we just don't know any different. We're so conditioned to think of food as something that has to be regulated and that has to be rule based, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because if it's not rule based, like, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
If there are no rules, how do I even know how to eat? And it's like, well, you knew how to eat at one point without the rules. We've just forgotten that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for athletes, again, like there's a lot of space for those numbers and those guidelines, and it can give you a great starting point. And then, like you said, still encouraging people to be really in tune with their bodies. So while I am not someone who typically gives calorie ranges,
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm working with someone who has hypothalamic amenorrhea, we're still going to have to do a food log at some point.
Sure.
We're going to have to make sure that like you're eating enough, you know?
Yeah.
So like there is definitely a place for all of those things. It's not like it all gets shoved out the window completely,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea is that you gradually help people just be more in tune with themselves. So like if you're hungry, have a snack. What if I already had my snack for the day? Have another
Exactly.
snack. Like it wasn't enough,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like it's okay. So I think a lot of it is just unlearning this tendency to want to follow the rules and
Yeah.
have the rules in place and relearning how to just be in tune with your body instead of fighting it all the time.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a tangent, but my principles are ditching the diet mentality, honoring your hunger, feeling your fullness, discovering the satisfaction factor, making peace with food, challenging the food police. Oh, I should have been counting.
Gentle nutrition.
Respecting gentle nutrition, respecting the body, and joyful movement, or
Feeling the difference.
like exercise for enjoyment.
Yeah. Something about feeling the difference. Yeah. Great. Nice job.
I think I got
you got them all. There are 10 principles. You guys can look them up, read the book. I'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And how does intuitive eating, and again, this is just my question. I mean, I think I generally get what Health at Every Size is about, but how does that like, I think a lot of people like clump them maybe together but they are separate things, right? I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
They are separate things. Yeah. So Health at Every Size is a registered trademark with the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health, otherwise known as ASDA. Their website is sizediversity.org, I think. So they have the Health at Every Size principles outlined, and they very much go hand in hand. So Linda Bacon is probably the best known like thought leader and researcher in the Health at Every Size world, because she wrote a book titled Health at Every Size, but she didn't necessarily come up with the acronym or the principles. Like it's a collective movement, a collective effort that's actually been in place for decades. And so intuitive eating and Health at Every Size definitely support each other, as if they're friends, like they hang out, you know? And so Health at Every Size is the philosophy that kind of fuels a lot of the intuitive eating views on health and how we can be more weight inclusive in our approaches to healthcare and our approaches to client counseling and our approaches definitely even to ourselves. Like, you know, recognizing that our body type might be such that we're never going to be a normal BMI, or we're never going to be this ideal body weight for our body size or whatever, but maybe we're still metabolically healthy at the weight that we're at, whatever that might be.
I find that to be the hardest part of, like, as I've been introducing more and more of these concepts, you know, and working with clients, you know, who have been just in the whole diet world for much of their life, if not almost their entire life, I find that to be the hardest part of helping people let go of the weight. You know, like it's really, 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 really hard to get somebody to not want to be a certain weight and to be able to accept their body at a certain size. And I think for me, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with, you know, wanting to look and feel better. You know, I don't, you know, if you want to manipulate your body or get leaner, get stronger, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that just for the sake of doing it. It's, of course, when it gets to that really unhealthy, obsessive place where, you know, you're just so negative and, you know, you're stop, you're changing your social life, and all the things that kind of go more into that disordered eating realm. But I think it's a tricky area to be in, because it can easily cross over into all of these unhealthy places. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard to
Yeah.
like, I don't want to not support people, because I know how I feel. I mean, I think everyone has, and part of that whole respecting your body, it's like, you don't have to like your body. It's just, you need to show it respect. I think that's what they
Right.
said in the book. So
Mhm.
I think all of us have certain insecurities or certain things we wish we could kind of manipulate our bodies, in some degree. And maybe some people, they fully accept their body, they're happy, and that's great. But I think a lot of people are not yet at that place. And I don't know, it's such a tricky, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's such a tricky
Yeah.
area
Well,
to
I
be in,
mean,
any sense.
yeah, our culture makes it a very hard place to be in because we see the thin ideal everywhere.
Yes.
We see it especially in healthcare, left and
Yep.
right. The thin ideal is upheld all over the place. So if you don't line up with that thin ideal and you don't fit the bill for someone's biased version of health, you experience stigma, discrimination, poor healthcare.
Exactly.
Like the list goes on. And so that actually is part of, like, within the health at every size community, a lot of what we're looking at and trying to make more clear to people is that experience of weight stigma and weight-based discrimination is probably at the root of some, if not all, of the health issues that we see associated with a higher weight. So if you think about hypertension, like the stress of going into a doctor's
Mhm.
office
Of
and getting
course.
your blood pressure measured, and like if you've been treated poorly up to that point, just stigma on a day-to-day basis, microaggressions. Like, I mean, it's just overall, we look at that weight stigma, that thin bias, again, that the systems that uphold the thin ideal are what we're trying to dismantle. So in the health at every size world, the intuitive eating world, there is no like anti-weight loss stance. And I think that's kind of
Okay.
misunderstood as well. Like, there are three things that could happen to your weight. It could go up, it could go down, it could stay the same.
Mhm.
No matter what we're dealing with, like athletes, pregnant
Yeah.
women, mom, dad,
Sure.
like humans,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like and so it's not that it's anti-weight loss per se, but it's anti-prescribing weight
Got it.
loss, or anti the assumption that weight loss equals
Of
health,
course. Yeah.
instead of looking at the behaviors. So with health at every size, one of the big parts of that movement is health promoting behaviors, as opposed to, oh, you are unhealthy, let me prescribe weight loss and that will fix everything.
Totally.
But I don't care how you get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if it's a surgery, if it's starving yourself, if it's running yourself to the ground, doesn't matter, lose the
Yeah.
weight. And that's like generally the message that is received. I'm not saying that's always the message that's given, but it's how it's
Oh,
received,
absolutely. I mean, so, one of the places I work at that accepts health insurance, we get a lot of doctor referrals, and, absolutely so many people that get referred in, it's for weight loss. And I look, I'm like, why?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, they have all these different kind of medical issues, and sure, weight loss might help with that. But then if we kind of break it down, like, what is the real problem? Okay, well, this is like, a high powered attorney working in New York City with 3 kids who doesn't sleep and, drinks too much, and
Right.
like, there are all these like behaviors that's like, okay, well, sure, weight might be involved in that, but how about we focus on all these other things that are going on, the quality of the diet, and, reducing stress, and, all these other things that, are they're connected, of course, to your weight, and your weight might be changed as a result, but that's what we're really focusing on there. It's not like, if you just
Right.
eat less, but you're equally stressed out and don't sleep still, and all, don't change anything else, that you're going to be a more healthy person. So yeah, I
Mhm.
do agree that there's so much emphasis on weight. So that's really interesting. And I'm glad you clarified that. Cause in my mind, I
Yeah.
was wondering, I was like, well, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with losing weight. And of course, weight loss might not be an intentional thing either. It just happens. Your weight fluctuates. That's part of life, you know? So
Mhm.
when
Right.
so I guess kind of circling back a little bit, when you are working with someone who, has been really ingrained, just like really obsessed with achieving a certain weight, like how does one get to a place of being more at peace with their own natural weight? Because I know in the book, in the intuitive eating book, it's like, this is not a weight loss diet. This is not a diet period. And your weight
Mhm.
may or may not change as you kind of go on this journey. So I'm curious if you, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it looks different with every single client you are. And there are, of course, like mental implications and kind of involvement here, but just curious if you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So I think a lot of times when people come in and maybe they're referred for weight loss, in which case maybe it is something they want, or maybe it's not
Yeah,
something they
exactly.
want. Or, in the example of an athlete, if they come to you and say, I really want to lose weight and train for this, or I want to lose weight so I can be faster at
Yes.
this. Like, I think part of the process of learning to accept your body or be at peace with the body type that you have is taking the focus off of that, removing any behavior that tends to breed an obsession with weight, like weighing yourself regularly, tracking it in an app,
Hmm.
like all of the things that kind of feed into that external feedback loop. And then focusing on what's at the root of that desire. So if you have a desire for your body to be a certain type, or for your weight to be something that it used to be, or something that you think it should be, or something you've told it should
Hmm.
be, or have been
Hmm.
told that it should be, um, how can we like strip down the layers and get at the root of it? So a lot of times, let's take an athlete, for example. I want to lose weight so I can be faster. Well, what does it mean to you to be faster? Like, what does that accomplish in your life? Well, then I'm a better athlete. Why do you need to be a better athlete? Because that makes me a better person. Why do you think being a better athlete makes you a better person? So it's like this line of questioning that can get a little bit uncomfortable, because a lot of times a desire for weight, again, it's systemic, and it's part of
Yeah.
our culture to believe that we have this then ideal and we can all achieve it if we just work a little bit harder, which is false. But it's also, we are meant to believe that once our weight and our body type are acceptable within this very narrow range of acceptability, that our life will miraculously be amazing. Everything will change. We'll be the best athlete in the world. We'll have all the best clients. We'll make all the money. We'll have great relationships. Like, we are meant to believe that that is
Yeah.
tied to our weight. And we've been receiving that message for probably most of our life, no matter where you are, if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 50s, your 80s, like that's the message that we get. So to answer the question of like, how do we let go of that idea that my body needs to be a certain weight, or to accept that it may never be that weight, is trying to get at the root of that desire. And like, where does that
Mhm.
come from? And again, it maybe comes from like 18 different
Yeah, of
sources,
course.
like your doctor, your parents, your friends, your partner, like whomever it may be, or wherever it may be coming from. At the root of it is a desire for something else. And so we kind of have to get down to that. So with athletes, again, a lot of it comes down to, I want better performance. Okay, well, if you're not an elite or professional athlete, what does better performance do for you? I'm all for like wanting to challenge yourself, wanting to chase goals, and all of those
Mhm.
things. But does it really come down to weight, or does it come down to your training, your sleep, your recovery, your
Yeah,
nutrition, like
exactly.
your stress management outside of training? Like we tend to push all of those other actual meaningful behaviors and habits aside and focus on, well, if I just lost weight,
Mhm.
I would be a better athlete.
Exactly. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people come in to my office or, give me a call or email or whatever. And it's, I want weight loss, and whether it's marathon or they're on the Peloton bike or, whatever it is, it's like, I'm doing all this
Mhm.
exercise and I don't understand why I'm not losing weight. And I really want to lose weight. Or yeah, I want to lose weight so that I can be a better athlete, so I can be a faster runner. And they talk about racing weight all the time and that kind of stuff. Oh, well, shouldn't I be
Mhm.
a lower weight? And of course, well, okay. I mean, in theory, yes, if you are carrying less weight forward as you move your body forward as you run, like you will be in theory faster. So it wouldn't hurt. But as you were saying, like, yeah, why is this so important? Um, I know for myself, I mean, I started running marathons about 10 years ago, and I was really, I mean, it wasn't so much about weight, but it was, but the time though, I really like many people, you get really obsessed with time, especially for a type A person,
Mhm.
and you're really into these longer distance, things and training plans and all this stuff. And this is way before I was a dietitian. And, and it's, crossing the finish line, reaching a goal, getting a faster time, it's a huge rush. I get why
Right.
people want that. It feels so good. And then
Totally.
you're after the next big thing. It's like that, okay, that's great. And now that's not enough. I
Right.
have to do better. And it's like, I'm doing better and better
I
and
have to
better.
be better. I have to be lighter. I
Exactly.
have
And
to
it
be
never
faster.
stops.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sure a lot of people can relate that when they're new to a sport, that trajectory of improvement is huge. Like obviously your first race is a
Mhm.
PR, which is awesome. And then you keep getting better and faster. I mean, not everybody, but at least for me, it was like
Right.
PR after PR after PR. And then I always tell people, like as a coach, it's like not every race is going to be a good race. You're not always going to PR, and you can't always expect a PR. There comes a time where things will kind of settle down. You get older, and all this stuff happens. But it's really
Mhm.
just interesting, kind of, because I know firsthand how that feels. And then I remember kind of not really, like I got a PR in Chicago. I ran 2 Bostons, and then I got back more into trail running, which is, I mean, I know you do some trail running too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just such a different world. My husband does trail runs, and it's just, I don't know. I prefer it over the road now. It's just like a totally different community, and it's
Right.
so much like, I mean, obviously it's competitive. Like people make a living off of trail racing and everything, but for me at least, it was like less pressure and just, I don't know. It felt very refreshing and nice, and you also see out on the trails like all kinds of bodies, and of course
Mhm.
in on road races too, you see all kinds of bodies, um it's always interesting, just to kind of see the variety of ages and body types, and people just doing all kinds of different stuff, and it's very refreshing to kind of go back or just like revisit that, and then getting out of that whole like, well, if you're a runner, you're very thin and you have to do this, and just all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
total
I mean, I
tangent.
think that it's okay. I understand the line of thinking. I think that, like, coming back to race weight and then just this idea of like, how does intuitive eating fit in here with these athletes? I think, again, it's important to me to see it as a philosophy and a foundation. So, like, when I'm talking to someone about race weight, or, they want their body to be different, or they want as an athlete to have different results, it's like, okay, well, again, it's easy to forget that if you're at a certain race weight and you think that's going to make you faster, like what did it take to get there for your body? And is that sustainable? Because I think you will hear a lot of, especially professional runners, will say early in the sport, when I was less confident in my abilities and more insecure within my peer group as an elite runner, I thought if I can just look the part, I'll be faster. And so I did all these really unhealthy things to get myself there, and wasn't acknowledging how badly I was treating my body, all in the name of a weight. And then
Yeah.
I even saw, I won't call out the account because I don't think this is totally what they do all the time, but I just saw one post. It was like one of my like suggested based on who you follow.
Yeah.
And it was like a lot of before and after photos, mostly
Oh
for
yeah.
time. Like it
Uh-huh.
mostly was focused on time, which again kind of breeds this obsession with like, you're only better if you get faster.
Yeah.
But it was like, so and so lost X amount of pounds and took 5 minutes off her 5K time. I'm like, what else did she do?
Yeah.
She didn't just lose weight. Like she trained harder. She's been running
Sure.
longer. She's more like, she understands the sport better. You know how to pace yourself. Like there are so many other things. So that's like the intuitive eating, health at every size practitioner in me is like, it's not that she lost weight and got faster. It's that she trained differently. It's that she recovered well. It's that she, has done a couple of 5Ks. So she knows how to run the rate. Like it's not the weight, like
Yeah.
that wasn't the thing that got her there. And even though, like you said, there is like a physics equation here of like, okay, I hear a lot of triathletes say this, like my power to weight ratio,
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
A lot of
you
cyclists say
can
that.
do
Yeah,
the math,
exactly.
right? But if you get yourself to a weight that's not healthy for you and your body type, it's not sustainable. So
Yeah.
it's a short-lived satisfaction. It's a short-lived result. It's not sustainable. Your body will bounce back because we're wired to survive. And from a body physiological standpoint, weight loss is like famine and starvation, and we don't survive in famine and starvation, right? So it starts hoarding energy to try to get you back to where you were. So it's not a sustainable outcome. But what we can focus on is like satisfaction in the sport. Why do you do this? Why do you keep coming back to it? What is it about a PR or a new distance or a new speed that excites you? We can still chase all those things and feel motivated by them. But like you said, the PR is a moving target. You could reach that PR or reach that BQ and then want something faster. And so it's like you have to think about, if I do this race and I don't get the outcome I'm hoping for, what else can I get out of it? In what other way does this satisfy me as a person that enjoys this sport and enjoys being here and is like grateful for this day and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So like we can bring in the satisfaction factor. Like, what is it that drives you? You know, there are just so
Yeah.
many different ways to look at it and kind of hopefully convince people
Yeah.
that like weight is a part of your body, but it's not all of who you are. And it's only one measure of your body type or your
Exactly.
physical attributes, but it's not a measure of your health or your vitality or, you know, insert whatever else people are concerned about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Not to mention
yeah.
that when you're losing weight, you're losing muscle mass most likely too, which,
Mhm.
you know, if you're just getting very, very thin, you know, and you're losing strength, you know, you may not perform better. You know, there is like a limit to which like losing weight is not something that is helping you. It's working against you. And if you're under fueling, you might be increasing your injury and illness risk. Of course, among women, you might be, you know, losing your period, putting bone health at risk. I mean, I'm sure
Right.
you're in the same boat. I get so many people coming to me. It's not like, I mean, yes, I get some people who are super responsible on top and they're like, I just want to make sure I'm feeling well and doing great for my upcoming race. I'm like, awesome. But more so, I get people coming in being like, my race was a total disaster. I, you know, have like 3 stress fractures, or I've gotten injured every year for the last 3 years, or, you know, I fainted like a mile from the finish line, or whatever it is. I mean, and it's not always nutrition related, but it's most often nutrition related. And it's always people come to us. I feel like we're like the last resort. Don't you sometimes feel that way? It's like they work with a coach. They
like
work
I've
with all
done
this.
everything else.
I worked with like a life coach, and I've worked with like this coach and that coach, and I worked with a personal trainer. And it's like, but oh my God, spend money on dietitian. Why would I ever do that? But
I can find that information on the internet, right?
I know. I can just talk to my friend in the running club and they'll tell me what to eat.
Right.
Yeah. But then they're like, wow, I've tried everything. I'm desperate. I'm come to you. I'm like, well, finally. Okay, good. Let's get to work. But yeah, so I'm really glad we talked a little bit about that. Kind of wrapping that whole thing up. So circling back to that whole, like a metabolic test, for instance, like I do sometimes with my Ironman athletes who don't always want to lose weight. I mean, maybe they want to get a little bit leaner. And I'm always emphasizing, you know, our priority has to be fueling you. Like you will not reach the start line in good health and feeling strong and ready to perform well if you are not fueling appropriately. So, you know, one of the things we sometimes do with the metabolic test is just to get a sense of, you know, how, because sometimes they need like over 3,000 calories a day, up to upwards of 4,000, depending on who I'm working with. So, which is really hard to do, by the way. But you know, we're trying to just get the calories in, and people really have a hard time getting there. So that is sometimes when we're like, okay, let's use these as guidelines. Like, I still want you to listen to your body. Like, I still want you to be in tune with everything. And then, of course, the run coach in me, I mean, I'm not really run coaching so much these days, but doing mostly nutrition stuff. But, you know, the run coach in me is always like thinking about being flexible. Like, as you said, like if it's not appropriate to do a speed workout today, like don't do it, be flexible with your schedule. So like sometimes it's kind of like, I sometimes at this point, I feel like I use the numbers as like guidance, you know, and like a reference point. Because we do want to avoid injury and illness and all of that. So I do still feel that numbers can be helpful, but I don't want you like to live and die by the numbers, you know?
Well, and I think that's where you run into a challenge with a lot of people is like, once they have the numbers, they live and die by them.
Yep.
I definitely think it's a helpful tool though. I mean, take the example of someone who maybe needs 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. And like, I won't even like speculate what type of person that is because it could be anyone. So like you have this person who needs that and they've been aiming through their nice obsessive food tracker to eat 1,500 to 2,000. Like, you know, that's a really helpful tool for that type of athlete because they're significantly underfueling, but maybe don't feel like they are because of the cultural narrative that this is based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, blah, blah, you know? Like,
or even people who are, you know, are more in the disordered eating realm. We sometimes do the test as well, just to show them, you know, this is how much you need. Like you need this. And of course, like if you've been chronically underfueling, you're also hurting your metabolism, which again is working against you. So I think people really don't understand how much harm they're doing to themselves mentally and physically when they're trying so hard to lose weight, quote unquote, in the name of performance or whatever.
Right.
And, as I was talking with you earlier, like I heard you on Jason Fitzgerald's podcast, Strength Running. And to my listeners, Jason Fitzgerald will be coming on next month. So that'll be exciting too. But yeah, you guys were talking about weight loss and performance and how it's really important to kind of separate the two, because if you're trying to do them both at once, you're basically going to accomplish nothing. You're just going to get mediocre results at best in both areas. And I know you're not focusing so much on weight loss, and I know Jason does some weight loss stuff, but the point being that, you have to prioritize, obviously your health. And if performance is really that important to you, and again, you're trying to reach a weight in the name of performance, you have to focus on all these other measures that, and all these other behaviors that are really going to get you there, so making sure you are fueling appropriately so that you can complete your workouts and recover well, and focus on sleep and life stress, which ties into recovery. I mean, there's just so many other important things that you can focus on rather than torturing yourself about your weight.
Right. Yeah. And when weight loss is on the table as something that someone is working on, that tends to override everything else. So you have your first time marathoner who says, I want to lose weight and I want to train for this marathon. Oftentimes, if they were to rank those two goals, the weight loss is first and the marathon is second. And you can't really like effectively train for a marathon if your first focus is weight loss, because then you're going to override all the things should be doing for recovery and for like healthy endurance building and healthy strength building. And it's not to say, again, that weight loss may not happen for someone while they're training. I mean, ideally it doesn't, because we want to maintain all of the body's like lean muscle mass and we want to maintain health and all of those things. But for someone who maybe is just like brand new to sport and is getting into running and wants to try to, start with a shorter distance and get up to a longer distance, like their body may or may not change, but the intuitive eating like paradigm, the health at every size paradigm, is basically asking us not to make assumptions, not to assume that someone's body will definitely lose weight because we're doing all the right math and that's going to happen. And also not to put an emphasis on that as if it's the best thing that could happen, which is a lot of the narrative that people get is like, if you've lost weight, what an accomplishment. Like, look at you go, instead of like, wow, it probably took a lot of like overriding your body's cues and not listening to what your body needs for that to happen. And for some people, again, they might get into a new activity and their body might change, but we don't have to praise that. It's just an outcome. Like, it's not something that is an accomplishment. It's not something that's good or bad. It's a neutral outcome. And so that's just like a total shift within our mindset as practitioners, is like, okay, well, I want to keep an eye on someone's weight, maybe if they're an athlete that I'm working with, so that I know where their health status is. And like, it's only one part of a huge picture. It's not the one thing that we focus on. But then for the person, like, again, just not seeing that as an accomplishment that they have to chase down, but instead focusing on like, why are you doing this for? Like, what do you get out of this? And of course, exercise is good for our health. And we want to make sure that like people are physically active. But if the only outcome they're after is weight loss, then I would want to be like, okay, let's pedal it back a little bit and like see what's behind this.
I've also definitely had, people come to me and say like, especially like first time marathoners, be like, I don't understand. I gained all this weight while training for a marathon. And that's always an interesting one. I'd say it's more often my female clients, but not always. But then it's like, okay, well, what are you doing on like, what's going on here? And of course, like it comes out, well, they run a 20 miler and they're sitting on the couch, they're eating like, 5 to 10 cupcakes and like, or whatever it is. I don't know what's going on, but there are all these things. And that's always an interesting one too, to kind of explore behaviors. Or maybe they're just being so restrictive and then they're like, oh my God, my appetite's out of control and they don't know how to control it. And then they're, craving all these sugars and because they didn't fuel themselves well and their body's just like, I want energy. So it's always interesting kind of working on those things and trying to just like bring everybody back to a place of like, let's just try to like even everything out here and get back in touch with what you really want to be eating and what you actually need. Like, I'm sure those 5 cupcakes weren't that satisfying towards the end of that. And, I don't know. That's something I also see as well.
Yeah, I've definitely seen, again, like our weight could go up, it could go down, it could stay the same.
Yep.
We have no idea, like we don't know. And it could be like another example of someone whose weight change during a training cycle could be that they were for once actually fueling their body according to what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe like in a previous phase, they were maybe restricting, or they were following a lot of really strict rules. And then with a marathon training plan or a half or a 10K or 5K, maybe they gave themselves a little bit more permission to tune into their body, see what it needs, and respond to that. And by nature, maybe their body changed, and that was just a surprise to them. It wasn't what they expected. But then it's like, well, maybe it doesn't have to be a good or bad outcome. Again, it can be a neutral outcome. We just have to like kind of hone in on like what's important to that person and where are they with their health, if that's something that's important to them. And, there are just like so many other factors to consider.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the other thing that I really like about this whole general approach to fueling yourself, I mean, especially in it's not just the athletic space, it's all over, but I mean, the keto diet and intermittent fasting and all these things that we just see so much especially as dietitians, like people coming in, often they're on keto and intermittent fasting diet at once. And it's just like, oh my God.
What a joy.
It's just like, I definitely had clients come in that pretty much they were like on like 5 different fad diets at once. I'm like, I don't even know how that's even possible.
Where do you start?
It's just like, I'm trying not to roll my eyes as like it's like some like, 20-something year old guy who's lifting and wants 6-pack and is on all these different diets. And I'm just like, oh my God. But it's just trying to like strip away all that BS. And I definitely know there are cases where these styles of eating will work for them. And I'm always asked about, like, I'm doing a talk for a big running club here next month. And one of the topics they want me to cover is, keto diet and intermittent fasting and all that stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God, please eat carbs, please. please, I beg you. If you're training for a marathon, please, I beg you, eat carbs. Same to my listeners, please eat carbs. They're amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, we need to just like, it's really not that complicated. I feel like there's just so much noise out there making nutrition so incredibly complicated, when really it's like, eat a variety of foods, like eat lots of fruits and vegetables and things that you enjoy. And I know it is a lot more complicated than that. I get it. And it's very confusing, especially when there's so much stuff out there on the internet and in the world, and your friends are telling you in the office, whatever. But when you really distill it down, like it really is not that complicated.
Right.
So not to say you guys don't need us as dietitians. You do, I promise. We're not irrelevant. But
yeah, I think that like it comes down to a lot more than just the what do I do and when do I do it, but why do I do it?
Yes.
And like, what are some of the things that, one of my favorite questions to ask a client is, what informs your idea of health? Or what informs your idea of what healthy eating is or isn't? How do all of these information sources combine to create this version of health for yourself that you feel like you're constantly chasing and not really sure about?
Yeah. And it's amazing to hear people's stories about, how they were raised, and, they were sent to weight loss camps at age 10 and, whatever it was. I mean, some people just like, no wonder they're so messed up, or, in the head about what they believe their body should be, because they've never known any differently. And their loved ones have been telling them their whole life that they're overweight, so it's hard,
Yeah. I mean, when you run into like the come talk about intermittent fasting and keto for our runners group, it's like, that is like such a perfect example of kind of chasing the next big thing to be the next big athlete that you can
no. They want me to address why it's like not appropriate, or just talk about it. Don't worry. They're not saying like we're all following this diet. No, one of the topics, I think people just like to ask questions, like, and because it's such a buzz phrase, or a buzzword, whatever, they just want me to talk about it. Yeah, don't worry. They're not like espousing like, yes, let's all go keto and run marathons. That would be a disaster. Right. Okay, so let's switch gears. What is on the horizon for you? Are you training for anything? Like, what's going on with you right now?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of half marathons over the last year, which that feels like a good distance to me right now. It's manageable with having an 18-month-old. Yeah, like the time and energy that I have to dedicate to it doesn't feel super overwhelming to me. Again, this is all relative. Like, once you've done a few marathon training cycles, the half is like way more. It just fits into this life right now. So I don't have anything specific that I'm training for at the moment, but I do work with a coach. I work with Mary Johnson
Mm-hmm.
of Lift Run
Awesome.
Perform. And full disclaimer, or disclosure, I guess, I am a dietitian on her team of
Mm-hmm.
coaches. So it's a good relationship there. But yeah, I have a coach just to kind of help me keep things
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I'm also a coach. So I see the value in that.
Are you still run coaching, or
And
you've stopped that now?
I've stopped it for
Yeah,
now.
me
Yeah, I
too.
kind of put that on hold for a little while. So I
Yeah.
was like, I need some space in my brain.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I feel you there. I think I realized like I just wasn't enjoying putting together plans. And I always tell like I have so many running clients, and I'll be like, I'm happy to look at your plan informally and give you some like informal advice as part of our nutrition session, but I just don't want to coach you. Like
yeah,
I just like
yeah.
I talk about like finding satisfaction in things. Like I just wasn't like I questioned myself. I was like, you know what? This isn't something I want to do. I find it more annoying right now. Like I'm happy to
Yeah,
informally coach you, but I
yeah.
don't want to be your formal coach. But
There's
anyhow,
always something you can come back to if you
yes,
decide you want to do it
exactly,
again. But
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just kind of running for fun right now, which is really
Nice.
nice.
It's refreshing, isn't it? Just kind of having
Hmm.
some unstructured, like no pressure kind of challenges. I don't know.
Yes.
I stopped running about a month ago, which was a real shock to my whole pregnancy running plan, but I actually do not miss it. I must say it is hot as hell right now at the time of this recording, and
Mhm.
I've been really enjoying not, I mean, I'm probably gonna be taking like 6 or 7 months off running, which is I think this is the longest I've ever taken off. And
Yeah.
it's actually kind of nice in a surprising way.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I relate to that, and I think it speaks to like kind of coming into a sense of like comfort with yourself
Yeah,
and why you do things, right? Like
absolutely.
when I was coming back postpartum and easing back into running, and I did a lot of strength training first and didn't run for about 4 months, which wasn't really the plan, but just kind of how it worked out.
Hmm.
And I waited until I really felt comfortable going again. And I hear from so many people, and the narrative seems to be like, well, I was just really dying to get back into it. And I understand a lot of what's behind that, which is like it feels like something that's part of your identity and it's something you can do for yourself, and it's time away from
Hmm.
your kid if you need it,
Yeah,
which I think we all
I
do,
think we all
you
need
know.
that.
Yeah, like it's getting outside. Like there are so many reasons that I can definitely understand, like sort of missing it and wanting to get back into it. But I think like the drive and the rush, I'm always like, what? But why?
Yeah,
You know, like I was so tired and I didn't feel like I'm in a place now with myself and with all of these like thankfully with this kind of philosophy that I've used in my practice and have been able to translate to my own life, like I'll run when I can. It's going to be there. You
yeah,
know, it's not going anywhere and I won't have the fitness that I once had, but maybe it will come back, maybe it won't. Like I don't know, but
yeah,
I can be comfortable with that. And I know and recognize it takes a lot of work to get there, but for people who like for moms especially that I've worked with since, I'm like what's behind that rush? Like,
yeah,
what are you anxious about? Like, what is not working for you? What kind of support do you need? Like, running is not going to fill a void,
yeah,
you know, and it's not going to solve any problems. It will make you feel better short term and maybe long term if you're being really careful with how you reintegrate it. But like, I had a marathon on the schedule last year because I deferred when I was pregnant.
yeah.
And after about a week or two of running, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely not doing a marathon this year. Like, there is no question. And that was like probably one of the best decisions I made all year,
Yeah,
aside from having a kid. That was a good decision. But
yeah. See,
yeah, you know,
I needed you in my ear like postpartum because I was running pretty, I mean, I had growth restriction, so I was carrying very small even though I was trying my best to gain weight. I wasn't. My baby was very small. This time it is not a problem. I am like bigger than I was full term, which is awesome. Baby's measuring well. Partly also
yeah.
why I can't run so comfortably. I'm like peeing myself and I can't do it. But yeah, so last time it was 3 weeks postpartum. That's when I started run walking. And I really needed, I really like, I could have benefited from someone like you being like, yeah, there's really no rush. And I felt fine. It was hard getting back into it. It was winter. And, but you know, I slowly
Mhm.
started getting stronger. I felt good. Everything felt fine. You know, I was trying to be careful. I was listening to my body, all that kind of stuff. And then like 4 months later, bam, got a really horrible hip injury. Like I was out of commission for
Ooh.
so long. And that's partly what, between that and just some really bad breastfeeding challenges, and the fact that I am prone to anxiety, that really like put me into a tailspin of like postpartum anxiety, depression, because, you know, I didn't
Yeah.
have the outlet of exercise, and it was really stressful being a first time mom and like all that, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
And it really put me out of commission for so long. And I wish, and now it's like, I know better. It's like, I'm being so much smarter about everything. I'm just like, I'm going to take time, whatever time that I need. Like running will be there. Exactly what you said. There's no rush.
Right.
I'm working with an awesome prenatal postpartum physical therapist over at Finish Line Physical Therapy in New York City, who, you know, they specialize in runners. So like, that's been awesome. Just getting that kind of support. And, you know, I know that, you know, again, it's about priorities. It's like, you have to prioritize your health. I'm prioritizing the health of my pelvic floor muscles and like just not re-injuring myself, because I know how horrible that was, you know? So,
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I posted about postpartum running.
I remember I saw that.
Yes, I've started talking about it a lot more because I think it's important. And I don't mean to like alienate anyone who doesn't ever plan to be postpartum or can't be or whatever, but I think the more we hear about it and the more we know about it, the better for everyone.
Yeah.
So then you're not the friend who's like, why aren't you running yet?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But I also got a lot of pushback from people who were like, I feel really judged because I started running sooner and I've been fine.
Sure.
To which I'm like, okay, I mean, I certainly don't mean to like invalidate someone's experience or say that you weren't fine or that you did the wrong thing. Like, I don't mean that at all. But I think for the general population and like for even, I would say most of us, not even the average, like I think for most of us, it's going to be healthier and better long-term if we wait until our bodies are ready again. And we just don't give our bodies enough time to heal. And I mean, even 6 weeks is like laughable to me. I'm like, I was pregnant for basically 10 months. Like, what is 6 weeks going to do?
Yeah.
Like, let's be real about this.
Yeah.
And so I think like to the people who feel that way, because I'm imagining there might be some people listening who are like, yeah, I ran at 3 weeks and I feel fine.
Yeah. Well, I know people like that, but I mean, more power to them. It's great.
Yeah. And I just think that like, even if it is true to like come back that soon and you're going to be okay, I think like one, you maybe were an athlete beforehand. And so like your body is just genetically and physically prone to like recover a little bit faster. And that's great, but that's not true for everyone. So just be careful with that message. But two, like, even if you can, I'm still like, what's the rush?
Yeah.
You know, like, because we're not 100% sure. And I liken it a lot to like marathon recovery, like, especially when I was coaching, I made everyone take a week off minimum.
Yeah, totally.
Like, no question. And I had so many clients who were like, but I feel fine 3 days later. I'm like, you feel fine, but your body is not fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like you can't feel everything that's going on under the surface. So just trust me and take a week, or for some people longer, and like, just go with it. And it's like, it will always be there. You can always come back to it. There's no rush.
I think that's what happened with me is I felt fine until I didn't feel fine. And then I really was like effed up. Like I was like really just on the bench for a long time. And that was miserable. So you always have to think about the big picture and not just like right now. Like there are other things that you can do for mental health and for stress release and everything. Although I know it's just not the same as running, and I get that. And I always like being injured. I always tell my injured clients, I'm like, I completely get it. I've been there. Like I understand where you're at, but let's find some other things we can do.
Well, and I want to say just really quickly, like I've said all those things and I waited 4 months and I eased back in and I worked with a coach and I still had setbacks.
Like, right.
Nobody is perfect.
Like, it's
I still
part of getting older. Like it's just all this stuff in like your 30s. It's just like, oh man, it just starts to hit you. I want to wrap up with. I guess we don't have time for all of the questions I was going to do, but I'm going to be finishing my these sessions with something I'm calling quick bites, just fun questions we can kind of wrap up with. So I'll ask you a few of those, and then I know you got to run, so I won't take too much more of your time. Favorite on the go meal or snack?
Ooh, probably a PB&J.
Oh, so good.
It's easy.
Classic.
It's portable. I love it. Yeah.
Favorite meal or snack when you're not in a hurry?
Favorite meal if I'm not in a hurry, I really enjoy making like a homemade pizza.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't make the dough from scratch, so like
that's too much work.
Person,
I go for TJ's.
Yeah, I just like being able to like put it together and bake it to my preference and all that
awesome
stuff.
What about post race? What's kind of your go-to?
Um, it depends on what they have after the race.
Oh, got it. Yeah, yeah, that's right. The festival, of course.
Yeah. I would say my favorite, like when they have it, is like fresh cold watermelon by
Ooh, I
far.
had that recently. It's
That's rare,
delicious.
but
My husband
so
ran
good.
the Rock the Ridge 50 miler, and they had watermelon, and my daughter and I were like going to town on that stuff. It was so good. If you could share a meal with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, Michelle Obama.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
Just came to mind. Yeah. I'm like, there's so many people, but she's probably the person I want to
Yeah.
right now in this moment.
How do you like your eggs cooked if you eat eggs?
Scrambled.
Yum. Wine, beer, or liquor? What's your poison if you drink?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with wine for now. That's like seasonally my favorite.
I feel like my wine intake has like increased dramatically since having a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, like I've obviously not been drinking so much with being pregnant,
Right.
but there have definitely been some drinks in this pregnancy.
Oh, okay. I'm right there with you. Don't worry.
Hey, the Europeans do it. It's all
Exactly.
good. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Mint chocolate chip.
Ah, yum. Which carbs could you not live without?
At the moment, I think bagels. It's like just we're on a bagel kick in our house.
And lastly, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
My handheld water bottle.
Which one do you have?
I think I have a Nathan.
Me too.
I want to say I have a Nathan. My like overall active lifestyle. Man, that's tough. I want to say my Garmin, but like I can run without that and be fine.
Yeah.
Like it's nice to have. I don't mind having it, but I can.
Any
run
clothing
without
items or sports nutrition stuff? I forgot to ask you about your sports nutrition favorites.
I love Honey Stinger waffles and Scratch, like the Scratch drink mix and the Scratch chews. I love those. Yeah.
Awesome. I haven't tried those.
They're so good.
I hear I have a lot of people who love Scratch. I've been drinking Tailwind mostly because I love Tailwind stuff. They have a naked flavor that's really yummy. But yeah, Scratch bars and chews and the drink are also very popular among my clients. But yeah, I haven't tried the chews. The honey stinger waffles are delicious.
They're so good. And their pink lemonade chews. Those are my favorite if I were to get honey stinger chews. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Heather, for coming on. This was like such a enlightening and fun conversation. Yeah. And I know you got to run and be with your son now. So thanks for taking the time. And where can everyone find you if they want more information about you and your practice?
Sure. So I am at RD Real Talk and at Heather DCRD on Instagram because I have one for the podcast and one for more running and just kind of personal stuff. So that's Heather DCRD and Heather DCRD on Twitter.
And your website?
heathercaplan.com.
Awesome. And any more events that you're planning that are coming up that you want to share with my listeners?
Yeah. So we're doing a weight inclusive nutrition and dietetics event in Washington, D.C., my hometown at the moment, in September. So that's September 14th. And that is for practitioners, healthcare practitioners. And if you are a runner and identify as female and want to learn more about kind of reproductive health and things like that, we're always doing different virtual and in-person events for the Lane 9 Project. So that's lane9project.org.
And you also have a sports nutrition course that you run with the other dietitian, Kelly Jones, right? Is that still going on?
It is, yes. So our website is currently under construction. So okay. I would say email, it's called Fit Fueling, and it's the combination of sports nutrition and intuitive eating. And we have one for dietitians and we have one for just kind of regular athletes. And sometimes we have dietitians who take the athletes course. So you do you, but probably the best place to find information about that for now is just emailing us fitfueling@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone check Heather out. She's amazing, as you can see from our talk. And thanks again, Heather.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Claire. It was great.
So that wraps up my talk with Heather Caplan. If you want to learn more about Heather, you can visit her website, heathercaplan.com. Also, I encourage you to check out her podcast, RD Real Talk Podcast. You can also follow her on Instagram at RD Real Talk or email her rdrealtalk@gmail.com. If you are enjoying the podcast so far and would like to show me some support, I have a Patreon page. I do not have any sponsors yet, so any contributions are much appreciated. And if you'd like to check out my own services, of course, you can visit my website, eatforendurance.com, and on Instagram and Twitter, @eatforendurance. Please let me know what you thought. If you have any feedback, message me, send me an email, anything you want. Let me know what you think. If you have any topic requests, if you have any questions you'd like me to address in the future, I'd love to hear from you. And of course, I always appreciate reviews on iTunes and elsewhere, wherever you get your podcasts. So please feel free to leave a good review for me to help get more listeners out there. Have a good day, everybody, and thanks for listening.